There is a single sentence, short, calm, almost boring to say out loud, that can end a narcissist's entire performance faster than any argument, any confrontation, any dramatic exposure of their lies ever could. Most people spend years trying to fight narcissists with logic, with evidence, with carefully worded proof of their hypocrisy. None of it works the way this one sentence does. And once you understand why, you'll understand something about narcissism that most people never figure out, even after years of dealing with one up close. Here's the sentence. I'm not going to argue about this. That's it. No insult, no accusation, no raised voice. And yet, said at the right moment, with the right calm behind it, this sentence does something almost no other combination of words can do. It removes the fuel a narcissist needs to keep the interaction going at all. To understand why this works, you have to understand what a narcissist is actually doing, structurally, in any conflict. It's rarely, if ever, about the specific topic being argued. The topic is just the vehicle. What they're actually doing is fishing for a reaction, any reaction, because their internal sense of control depends on being able to predict and provoke your emotional state. Anger works, tears work, over-explaining works. Even you trying very hard to win the argument works, because as long as you're engaged in the argument at all, you're still playing on their field, by their rules, generating exactly the kind of emotional friction they know how to manipulate. I'm not going to argue about this does something they have no playbook for. It ends the game without giving them the satisfaction of winning it. It's not surrender. Surrender would sound like, fine, you're right, whatever. It's not counterattack either. It's simply a door quietly closing, mid-conversation, while you're still standing calmly on the other side of it. Watch what happens the first time someone actually says this to a narcissist and means it. There's almost always a beat of confusion, a flicker where you can see them recalibrating, because their entire strategy assumed you'd keep playing. Some escalate hard in that moment, raising the stakes, getting louder, because escalation has worked on you before. Others pivot instantly to a different tactic, guilt, maybe, or a sudden, unconvincing softness, testing whether a different angle will pull you back into engagement. What almost none of them do, at least not right away, is simply accept it and move on peacefully, because peaceful acceptance was never actually their goal in the first place. Winning the reaction was. This is exactly why this sentence is so much more effective than trying to prove them wrong with facts, timelines, screenshots, or logic. Because facts assume the argument is actually about the facts. It isn't. You could hand a narcissist perfect, irrefutable evidence that they lied, and instead of accepting it, they'll often just shift the goalposts. Well, you're twisting what I meant. Or, that's not the real issue here. Because the actual issue was never the facts. It was whether you'd stay hooked into the emotional tug-of-war. Facts don't unhook you. Refusing to argue does. I want to walk you through why this specific sentence works on a deeper psychological level, because it's not just about tone. It's about what it denies them access to. Every argument with a narcissist runs on a kind of hidden fuel source. Your continued emotional investment in being understood, being validated, being agreed with. And it makes sense that you'd want that. Most people reasonably want to be understood, especially by someone close to them. But a narcissist can sense that need, almost instinctively, and they know exactly how to keep dangling the possibility of resolution just out of reach, forever. Because as long as you believe resolution is possible, you'll keep showing up to fight for it. I'm not going to argue about this, quietly severs that fuel line. It's not saying you're wrong. It's saying, I no longer need this specific conversation to end in agreement. And a person who no longer needs agreement to feel okay is, structurally, someone a narcissist cannot pull on anymore, because there's nothing left dangling for them to keep just out of reach. Now, I want to be very clear about something, because there's a wrong way to use this sentence, and it actually makes things worse if used incorrectly. This sentence is not meant to be said with contempt or as a way to win the last word, or as a smug exit line delivered to provoke them further. If it's said that way, it becomes just another form of engagement, another emotional hook, dressed up as detachment. The sentence only works when it's genuinely detached, when you actually mean it, when your nervous system has actually stopped needing the outcome you used to fight so hard for. This is why, honestly, this sentence is often useless the first few times someone tries it, if they haven't done the internal work yet. Because a narcissist can sense performed calm from a mile away. It has a slightly brittle quality to it, a tightness underneath the words that gives away that you're still hoping, somewhere, that this will finally make them understand. Real detachment doesn't have that tightness. It's quiet all the way through. And that's exactly the version that actually lands. So how do you get to that version? The real one, not the performed one. That's exactly where we're headed in the second half of this episode. The specific internal shift that has to happen before this sentence stops being words you're forcing out and starts being a place you can actually stand in, and why, once you get there, a narcissist's entire strategy stops working on you almost overnight. So, let's talk about that internal shift, because this is the part that actually determines whether "I'm not going to argue about this" becomes a genuine boundary or just a hollow line you're borrowing from a podcast you heard once. The shift is this: you have to stop needing them to see it. Say that back to yourself slowly, because it sounds simple, almost obvious, but it is one of the hardest psychological pivots a person can make, especially if you've spent years, maybe your whole life, in relationships where being understood felt like the entire point of communicating at all. Most people, when they're hurt by someone, have an almost involuntary need for that person to finally get it, to see the impact of what they did, to feel some genuine remorse, to validate that the hurt was real and justified. This need feels so natural that most people never even question it. Of course I want them to understand. Isn't that what any reasonable person would want? But here's the specific trap this creates with a narcissist. And it's a trap almost nobody sees until they've been caught in it for years. Needing them to see it gives them the exact leverage they need to keep you in the argument indefinitely, because they can simply, endlessly, withhold the one thing you're waiting for. They can keep you hooked for months, sometimes years, on the promise of an understanding that was never actually coming, because the withholding itself is the mechanism of control. As long as you believe that if you just explain it one more time, one more way, with one more piece of evidence, they'll finally get it. You will keep showing up to explain, and they will keep you there in that exact spot for as long as it serves them. The internal shift that changes everything is realizing all the way down that your reality doesn't require their agreement to be real. This isn't resignation. It isn't giving up on being understood by anyone, ever. It's giving up on needing this specific person in this specific dynamic to be the one who finally validates what you already know happened. Once that need actually dissolves, not performed, not forced, but genuinely dissolved, something remarkable happens to your entire nervous system in these conversations. You stop bracing for their reaction. You stop rehearsing your explanation in the shower the night before. You stop feeling that familiar tightening in your chest before a conversation even starts, because you're no longer walking into it needing anything from them at all. And here's the part that explains why narcissists so often escalate dramatically the moment someone actually reaches this place, rather than calming down in relief that the conflict is finally over. Because from the narcissist's perspective, your detachment isn't peace, it's the loss of their supply. Remember, a narcissist's sense of control has always depended on their ability to generate a reaction in you: anger, tears, chasing, over-explaining, even stubborn defiance. All of it counts as engagement. All of it feeds the same mechanism. The moment you genuinely stop needing anything from them, you become, from their internal vantage point, a resource that has suddenly gone dry. And people don't calmly accept a resource going dry. They often panic first, in whatever way panic shows up for them specifically. Rage, guilt tripping, sudden charm, a full reversal of the story to make you the villain, anything that might reopen the tap. This is exactly why the period right after someone genuinely detaches from a narcissist is so often the most intense, not the calmest. If you've ever wondered why things got so much worse right when you finally stopped engaging, right when you finally set the boundary you'd been needing to set for years, this is why. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply stopped supplying something they had come to depend on. And what you're witnessing isn't your failure to handle the boundary well. It's their system responding to a resource loss it doesn't yet know how to survive. Knowing this in advance changes everything about how you experience that escalation, because instead of thinking, "This proves I made things worse," you can recognize it for what it actually is: proof the boundary worked. The intensity of the reaction is usually directly proportional to how much they'd come to rely on your engagement. A small reaction to a boundary usually means the supply wasn't that central. A massive, disproportionate reaction almost always means you just cut off something they'd built a significant part of their emotional stability around, whether either of you had ever named that out loud or not. So let's talk about what actually sustains this detachment once you've reached it, because reaching it once, in a single conversation, is different from being able to live inside it consistently, especially with someone who isn't going anywhere. A family member, a coworker, a co-parent, someone you can't simply walk away from entirely. The first thing that sustains it is building your own internal record of reality, completely separate from their acknowledgement of it. This sounds almost clinical, but it's incredibly effective. Write it down if you need to. Say it out loud to one trusted person once, and let that be enough. Keep your own quiet, private account of what actually happened, held with the same confidence you'd hold a fact about the physical world. The sky is blue, water is wet. That conversation happened the way I remember it happening. Your reality doesn't need a cosigner. It never did. The belief that it does is exactly what kept so many people stuck arguing for years, past the point where arguing could have ever accomplished anything. The second thing that sustains it is learning to recognize in real time the specific bait that used to work on you, because narcissists rarely abandon a strategy just because it stopped working once. They'll circle back to it, sometimes months later, dressed slightly differently. If guilt used to pull you back in, expect a version of guilt to resurface eventually, often disguised as vulnerability. "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore." Designed to reactivate the exact need you've been working so hard to release. Recognizing the bait the instant it appears, rather than 3 exchanges deep into engaging with it, is what makes detachment durable instead of temporary. And the third thing, maybe the most important, understand that this entire process is not about changing them. It never was, and this is the piece that finally, permanently exhausts people who spend years hoping otherwise. You cannot argue someone into having a conscience they don't currently access. You cannot out-logic someone whose entire system runs on emotional extraction rather than truth. The goal of everything we've talked about today was never to finally make them understand, finally make them apologize, finally make them see what they did. The goal was to build a version of yourself who no longer requires any of that in order to feel whole. And the strange, almost paradoxical gift hidden inside that shift is that the moment you stop needing them to change, you often become, for the first time, completely free of them, regardless of whether they ever change at all. I want to leave you with an image because I think it captures everything we've walked through today better than any explanation could. Picture a tug-of-war rope pulled taut between 2 people, both leaning back with all their weight, both straining, both convinced that if they just pull a little harder, a little longer, they'll finally win. This is what arguing with a narcissist feels like, for years, sometimes for an entire relationship. An exhausting, unwinnable contest of strength where both sides believe victory is just one more pull away. And then, one day, one person simply lets go of the rope. Not in anger, not as a dramatic gesture meant to make a point. They just quietly open their hands and the rope falls slack between them. Here's the thing about a tug of war when only one side is pulling. It isn't a contest anymore. It's just a person, alone, holding a rope, straining against nothing, off balance, sometimes stumbling backward from the sudden absence of resistance they'd built their entire stance around. The person who let go doesn't have to fight anymore. They don't have to win. They simply walk away, rope forgotten on the ground behind them, and for the first time in longer than they can remember, their hands are finally free to hold something else. That's what "I'm not going to argue about this" actually is underneath the words. It's not a clever comeback. It's not a strategy to win the fight. It's the moment someone finally, quietly, lets go of the rope. Not because they stopped caring about the truth, but because they finally understood that the truth was never actually going to be found at the other end of that particular struggle. And somewhere down the road, long after the rope has been forgotten, that same person is going to notice something they hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not relief exactly, but something steadier than both of those. Their hands, finally, full of their own life again.